The complete story of Ruth, one of the most important women in the Bible. The story of Ruth is a powerful narrative found in the Bible, specifically in the Book of Ruth, which is part of the Old Testament. Ruth is known as one of the most important women in the Bible, and her story is rich with themes of loyalty, faithfulness, and divine providence. Here's a summary of her story and its significance. The background of the story of Ruth is essential for understanding its context. The narrative takes place during the time of the Judges, a tumultuous period in ancient Israelite history, around 1200 to 1020 BCE. This era was marked by cycles of rebellion, oppression, and deliverance, as described in the Book of Judges. Israel had no centralized government, and the tribes were loosely connected, often falling into idolatry and conflict with neighboring nations. The famous phrase from Judges sums up this period. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. Judges 21 verse 25, NIV. The setting of Ruth. Famine in Bethlehem. The story begins in Bethlehem, a town in the territory of Judah, during a time of famine. Bethlehem, meaning house of bread, ironically suffers from a lack of food. The famine forces a man named Elimelech to seek refuge for his family in Moab, a neighboring country east of the Dead Sea. Moab. Moab was a land outside the covenant community of Israel, and relations between the Israelites and Moabites were often strained. Moabites descended from Lot, Abraham's nephew, through an incestuous relationship between Lot and his daughters. Genesis 19 verses 30 to 38. The Moabites were sometimes viewed negatively by the Israelites, making Ruth's origin significant in the story's unfolding themes of inclusion and redemption. Elimelech's family. Elimelech and his wife Naomi leave Bethlehem with their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and settle in Moab. Shortly after arriving, Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi as a widow in a foreign land. Her sons marry Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, but after about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also die, leaving Naomi and her daughters-in-law as widows without children. Cultural and religious context. Widows in ancient Israel. In ancient Israelite society, widows were among the most vulnerable members of society. Without a husband or male children, widows often faced economic hardship and social marginalization. The law of Moses provided certain protections for widows, including the right to glean in the fields, Leviticus 19 verses 9 to 10, and the practice of levirate marriage, where a close relative of the deceased would marry the widow to preserve the family line, Deuteronomy 25 verses 5 to 10. Kinsman Redeemer. The concept of the kinsman redeemer plays a critical role in the story of Ruth. According to Israelite custom, the nearest male relative had the responsibility to redeem, or buy back, property and care for family members in distress. This could involve marrying a childless widow to raise up offspring for the deceased relative, as Boaz eventually does for Ruth. Thematic overview. The background of famine, loss, and widowhood sets the stage for the themes of the Book of Ruth: loyalty, redemption, and divine providence. Ruth's story emerges in a time of uncertainty and personal tragedy, yet it becomes a narrative of hope, highlighting how God's plans unfold through everyday events and decisions. Ruth's loyalty is one of the central themes of her story and is exemplified in her relationship with her mother-in-law, Naomi. Here's a deeper look at the significance and impact of Ruth's loyalty. Ruth's decision to stay with Naomi. Naomi's departure. After the deaths of her husband and sons, Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem, her homeland, because the famine has ended. She encourages her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, to stay in Moab and remarry, as they are free to do so. Naomi's selfless advice stems from her desire for their well-being. Ruth's commitment. Ruth's response to Naomi's plea is a profound declaration of loyalty and love. Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Ruth 1 verse 16, NIV. This declaration is significant for several reasons. Personal loyalty. Ruth chooses to stay with Naomi despite the personal risk and hardship involved. She is willing to leave behind her homeland, her people, and her established life in Moab. Religious conversion. By adopting Naomi's God, Ruth demonstrates a commitment to Naomi's faith. This is an important aspect of her loyalty, as she embraces a new spiritual identity and way of life. Cultural and social risk. Ruth, a Moabite woman, would be entering a foreign land with different customs and expectations. Her decision involves significant social and cultural risks, but her loyalty to Naomi outweighs these concerns. Orpah's departure. In contrast to Ruth, Orpah decides to return to her Moabite family and remarry. While this decision is practical and understandable, Ruth's choice highlights the depth of her commitment to Naomi. Impact of Ruth's loyalty. Mutual support. Ruth's loyalty provides Naomi with emotional and practical support. Naomi is grieving the loss of her husband and sons, and Ruth's presence offers companionship and help as they face poverty together in Bethlehem. Divine providence. Ruth's loyalty is a key factor in the unfolding of the story's larger narrative. Her decision leads her to glean in the fields of Boaz, who turns out to be a kinsman redeemer. This ultimately leads to her marriage to Boaz and the birth of Obed, who becomes the grandfather of King David. Theological and moral lessons. Ruth's loyalty is a model of steadfast love and devotion. It illustrates the importance of faithfulness and commitment in relationships, even when circumstances are challenging. Her story underscores that such loyalty is recognized and rewarded by God, reinforcing the themes of divine providence and grace. Legacy. Ruth's loyalty is celebrated in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in the New Testament, Matthew 1 verse 5. Her inclusion in this lineage highlights the broader message of redemption and the inclusive nature of God's plan. In summary, Ruth's loyalty to Naomi is a central element of her story and serves as a powerful example of faithfulness, love, and the impact of personal commitment on broader divine purposes. Once Ruth and Naomi arrive in Bethlehem, the story transitions to their new life in the community and the challenges they face. Here's a detailed look at Ruth's experiences in Bethlehem and how they lead to significant events in the narrative. Arrival in Bethlehem. Welcome and recognition. When Ruth and Naomi return to Bethlehem, the town is stirred by their arrival. Naomi is recognized by the townspeople, and she tells them to call her Mara, meaning bitter, because of the hardships she has endured. This reflects Naomi's deep grief and sense of loss. Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. Ruth 1 verse 20, NIV. Economic hardship. The return to Bethlehem places Naomi and Ruth in a precarious situation. They have no means of support and are in need of food. In ancient Israel, the poor and widowed were allowed to glean the leftover grain from the fields after the harvesters had passed through. This practice was part of the law to provide for the less fortunate. Ruth's gleaning. Field of Boaz. Ruth goes to glean in the fields to gather grain for herself and Naomi. She happens to work in the field of Boaz, a wealthy and respected man who is a relative of Naomi's deceased husband. This chance encounter is a pivotal moment in the story. Boaz's kindness. Boaz notices Ruth and inquires about her. He learns of her loyalty to Naomi and is impressed by her diligence and character. Boaz ensures that Ruth is treated well, instructing his workers to leave extra grain for her and to offer her protection. I have been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. Ruth 2 verse 11, NIV. Boaz's favor. Boaz's favor towards Ruth is not just about providing her with extra grain. It also reflects his respect for her as a foreigner who has shown extraordinary loyalty and kindness. His actions are guided by both his sense of duty and admiration for Ruth's character. Naomi's plan. Strategic proposal. Naomi recognizes Boaz as a kinsman redeemer, a relative who has the obligation to help redeem or marry a widowed relative to preserve the family line. She devises a plan for Ruth to approach Boaz and propose marriage. Threshing floor encounter. Following Naomi's advice, Ruth goes to the threshing floor where Boaz is winnowing barley. She approaches him at night and uncovers his feet, a symbolic gesture of requesting his protection and proposing marriage. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. Ruth 3 verse 9, NIV. Boaz's response. Boaz is surprised but pleased by Ruth's proposal. He agrees to marry her, but informs her that there is another relative who has the first right to redeem her. Boaz promises to address this matter and resolve it according to the customs of the time. Boaz as kinsman redeemer. Resolution. Boaz brings the matter before the town elders and the other relative at the city gate. The other relative relinquishes his right to redeem Ruth, allowing Boaz to marry her. This decision is witnessed and formalized in the presence of the elders, ensuring the integrity of the transaction. Marriage and legacy. Boaz and Ruth marry, and Ruth bears a son named Obed. This child is significant because he becomes the grandfather of King David, thereby placing Ruth in the lineage of David and, by extension, Jesus Christ. Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. Ruth 4 verse 14, NIV. Conclusion. Ruth's time in Bethlehem marks a transformative period in her life and in the broader narrative. Her humble beginnings as a foreign widow lead to her becoming part of Israel's royal lineage. The story highlights themes of providence, loyalty, and redemption, and Ruth's integration into the Bethlehem community underscores the inclusive nature of God's plans. The relationship between Ruth and Boaz is central to the narrative of the Book of Ruth and is pivotal to the story's themes of redemption and divine providence. Here's a detailed look at their relationship and its significance. Meeting and initial interaction. Gleaning in Boaz's field. Ruth meets Boaz when she goes to glean in his field. Boaz is immediately struck by her dedication and character. He inquires about her and learns about her loyalty to Naomi. Boaz's kindness. Boaz ensures that Ruth is treated well. He instructs his workers to leave extra grain for her and to allow her to glean among the sheaves, not just the leftovers. This action demonstrates his respect and kindness toward her, which is not only a practical help, but also a reflection of his character. I have been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. Ruth 2 verse 11, NIV. The threshing floor encounter. Naomi's plan. Naomi, aware of Boaz's role as a kinsman redeemer, devises a plan for Ruth to propose marriage to Boaz. Naomi's plan involves Ruth visiting Boaz at the threshing floor, where Boaz is working late into the night. Ruth's proposal. Ruth follows Naomi's advice and approaches Boaz at the threshing floor. She uncovers his feet and lies down at his feet, a symbolic gesture requesting his protection and proposing that he fulfill his role as kinsman redeemer. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. Ruth 3 verse 9, NIV. Boaz's reaction. Boaz is impressed by Ruth's proposal. He acknowledges her virtuous character and agrees to marry her, but mentions that there is another relative who has the first right to redeem her. Boaz promises to address this issue and resolve it according to the customs of the time. The legal process. The city gate. Boaz takes the matter to the city gate, where legal transactions and community matters are settled. He meets with the other relative and the town elders. The other relative decides not to exercise his right to redeem Ruth, thus allowing Boaz to proceed. Boaz's redemption. Boaz formally redeems Ruth, marrying her in the presence of the elders. This act not only secures Ruth's future, but also preserves the family line of Naomi's deceased husband. Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Ruth 4 verse 13, NIV. Significance of their relationship. Redemption and family continuity. Boaz's role as a kinsman redeemer is central to the story. By marrying Ruth and redeeming her family line, Boaz fulfills a key social and legal obligation, preserving the family's inheritance and legacy. This act of redemption is a significant theme in the narrative. Divine providence. The relationship between Ruth and Boaz illustrates the theme of divine providence. Their meeting and eventual marriage are portrayed as part of God's plan, guiding events to fulfill his purposes and ensuring the continuation of the family line that leads to King David. Virtue and integrity. Both Ruth and Boaz are portrayed as individuals of great virtue and integrity. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi and Boaz's kindness and adherence to social and legal responsibilities highlight their character and the moral lessons of the story. Genealogical significance. Ruth and Boaz's union results in the birth of Obed, who becomes the grandfather of King David. This lineage is significant in biblical history, as David is an important figure in Israel and an ancestor of Jesus Christ, according to the New Testament. In summary, the relationship between Ruth and Boaz is marked by mutual respect, kindness, and a sense of duty. Their story is a powerful example of how personal integrity and divine guidance can lead to redemption and fulfillment of a larger, divinely orchestrated plan. Ruth's significance in the Bible extends beyond her personal story and highlights broader themes of faith, loyalty, and divine providence. Here's an exploration of her importance. 1. Model of loyalty and faithfulness. Commitment to Naomi. Ruth's unwavering loyalty to her mother-in-law Naomi, despite the personal hardships she faces, sets a powerful example of faithfulness and love. Her decision to stay with Naomi and embrace her people and God exemplifies deep commitment and selflessness. Adoption of Naomi's faith. Ruth's willingness to adopt Naomi's God and faith reflects her genuine spiritual devotion and highlights the inclusive nature of God's covenant. 2. Inclusion and redemption. Moabite background. As a Moabite woman, Ruth's inclusion in the story underscores the theme of redemption and the breaking down of ethnic and cultural barriers. Despite being from a nation often viewed negatively by the Israelites, Ruth's faithfulness allows her to become part of the covenant community. Role of kinsman redeemer. Ruth's story is intertwined with the concept of the kinsman redeemer, a significant aspect of Israelite law. Boaz's role as redeemer and Ruth's acceptance of his redemption highlight the importance of fulfilling social and legal responsibilities to protect and preserve family lines. 3. Divine providence and guidance. Providential timing. The story of Ruth illustrates how seemingly ordinary events are part of God's greater plan. Ruth's chance gleaning in Boaz's field and the subsequent developments are seen as part of divine providence, guiding the course of events for a greater purpose. Blessing and favor. Ruth's story demonstrates how faithfulness and integrity are rewarded. Boaz's kindness and the subsequent blessings on Ruth and Naomi reflect God's favor and the principle of divine justice. 4. Genealogical importance. Lineage of King David. Ruth and Boaz's marriage results in the birth of Obed, who becomes the father of Jesse and the grandfather of King David. This places Ruth in the direct lineage of one of Israel's greatest kings. Connection to Jesus Christ. According to the New Testament, specifically the genealogy presented in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew 1 verse 5, Ruth is an ancestor of Jesus Christ. This highlights the significance of her role in the broader narrative of salvation history. 5. Theological themes. Inclusivity of God's plan. Ruth's story illustrates that God's plan of salvation is inclusive and reaches beyond ethnic and cultural boundaries. Her acceptance and blessing as a Moabite woman emphasize that God's grace is available to all people. Redemptive love. The themes of redemption and restoration are central to Ruth's story. Her personal redemption, the preservation of Naomi's family line, and the broader narrative of God's redemptive work in history reflect key theological themes. 6. Cultural and moral lessons. Virtue and integrity. Ruth's character embodies virtues such as loyalty, humility, and integrity. Her actions and choices serve as moral lessons for readers and offer a model of righteous behavior. Social responsibility. The story highlights the importance of social responsibility and caring for the vulnerable. Boaz's role as kinsman redeemer and the laws concerning gleaning reflect a social ethic that values justice and compassion. In summary, Ruth's significance lies in her exemplary character, her role in the lineage of King David and Jesus Christ, and the broader theological and moral themes her story represents. Her narrative offers a powerful testament to faith, loyalty, and the inclusive nature of divine redemption. Ruth's legacy is profound and multifaceted, influencing both biblical history and Christian theology. Here are key aspects of her legacy. 1. Genealogical significance. Ancestry of King David. Ruth and Boaz's marriage leads to the birth of Obed, who becomes the father of Jesse. Jesse is the father of King David, making Ruth an ancestor of one of Israel's most revered kings. This genealogical link emphasizes her crucial role in Israel's royal lineage. Connection to Jesus Christ. According to the New Testament, specifically Matthew 1 verse 5, Ruth is part of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. This connection highlights the significance of her story in the broader narrative of Christian salvation history. 2. Theological impact. Inclusivity and grace. Ruth's story is a powerful example of God's inclusive grace. As a Moabite woman, her acceptance and inclusion into the covenant community of Israel illustrate that God's love and redemption extend beyond ethnic and national boundaries. This theme is significant in both Old Testament and New Testament contexts. Redemptive themes. The themes of redemption and providence in Ruth's story reflect broader theological concepts in Christianity. Her life is seen as part of the larger redemptive narrative that leads to the birth of Jesus Christ and the fulfillment of God's promises. 3. Moral and ethical lessons. Virtue and loyalty. Ruth's character is celebrated for her loyalty, integrity, and devotion. Her actions provide a model of virtuous behavior, emphasizing the importance of faithfulness, selflessness, and commitment in personal relationships. Social justice. The story highlights social ethics and responsibility. The practices related to gleaning and the role of the kinsman redeemer reflect a societal commitment to caring for the vulnerable and ensuring justice. These principles have influenced Christian teachings on social justice and compassion. 4. Cultural and literary influence. Biblical literature. The Book of Ruth is considered a masterpiece of biblical narrative, known for its literary beauty and depth. It is studied for its theological insights, storytelling, and its role in the biblical canon. Cultural impact. Ruth's story has been a source of inspiration in literature, art, and culture. Her narrative is often referenced to illustrate themes of loyalty, redemption, and divine providence. 5. Historical and religious observance. Jewish tradition. In Jewish tradition, the story of Ruth is read during Shavuot, the Festival of Weeks. This practice connects Ruth's story with the giving of the Torah and highlights themes of conversion and commitment to the Jewish faith. Christian reflection. In Christianity, Ruth is often celebrated for her role in the lineage of Jesus and as a symbol of God's grace and the inclusivity of the gospel message. 6. Personal inspiration. Role model. For individuals and communities, Ruth's story continues to inspire personal faith and commitment. Her life encourages readers to trust in God's providence, act with integrity, and embrace a life of loyalty and compassion. In summary, Ruth's legacy encompasses her vital role in the genealogy of Jesus Christ, her embodiment of virtues and ethical principles, and her influence on religious observance and cultural expressions. Her story remains a powerful testament to faith, redemption, and the inclusive nature of divine grace.